Acing your WAEC and NECO examinations has been made easy by the Lagos State Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education with the Eko Learners Support for WAEC and NECO Candidates television program. Join seasoned teachers as they take you through these core subjects, targeting the exact syllabus of WAEC and NECO. Watch Eko Learners Support for WAEC and NECO candidates through these social media platforms to access more educational content and give their feedback. Eko Learners Support for WAEC and NECO candidates. Pass your examinations with flying colors.
Hello viewers. How are you doing today? I trust you are doing well. You are welcome to Eko Learners Support for WAEC and NECO candidates. My name is Oyeno Emmanuel Shion, and I will be taking you history. Today, we'll be looking at a very sensitive topic, which is slavery and slave trade in Africa. Slavery and slave trade in Africa. At the end of today's lesson, students will 1. Explain the concepts slavery, slave, and slave trade. 2. We trace the origin of slavery in pre-colonial Africa. 3. We identify the forms of slavery we have during the pre-colonial Africa. We described how slaves were obtained. Lastly, we examine the reasons for the introduction of slave trade, and we look at the effects in Africa. The concept of slavery, slave, and slave trade. What is slavery? Slavery is a social and economic system in which individuals are owned by others as a property or are deprived of their personal freedom. A system whereby people are being owned by another person or being deprived of their personal rights. Slave. Who is a slave? A slave is an individual who is legally owned by another person or entity and is being forced to work without compensation. An individual that is being owned by another person in order to work without compensation. So slaves are considered to be the property of the owner, and slaves lack all forms of freedom or rights. Status as slaves means that such person is a subject to the will of their masters and can be bought and sold in form of trade. Slave trade. What is slave trade? Slave trade refers to the capturing, buying, selling, and transportation of slaves, often across long distance. Slave trade has existed throughout the world since ancient time. And trading in slaves has actually been made universal. Examples of slave trade that occur are the Trans-Sahara slave trade, Indian Ocean slave trade, and transatlantic slave trade. The origin of slavery in pre-colonial Africa. slavery in Africa existed long before the arrival of Europeans. Yes, even before the arrival of the Europeans into Africa, slavery has been in existence. It was often intertwined with local customs and social hierarchies. Yes, there are some societies that have hierarchies where some people are being regarded as slaves to their masters. So some society, even before the arrival of the Europeans, have been practicing slave trade and slavery. Also, it is worthy to note that some powerful empires like Ghana, Mali, Songhai also engage in the trade. Slaves were being used for agriculture, mining, even soldiers in some empires. African slaves were traded through the Sahara Desert, which is known as the Trans-Sahara trade, to North Africa and the Middle East. This trade route facilitated the exchange of slaves for goods and other services, such as goods like salt, like gold, like horses, and so on. Also, in Central and East Africa, kingdoms like Congo, they involve in slave trade through the Indian Ocean. And lastly, for the transatlantic slave trade, is being done by Europeans to Africa and then to the Americans. Forms of slavery. We have up to about 5 different forms of slavery. 1, chattel slavery. What is chattel slavery? This is the most extreme form of slavery, where individuals are being treated as personal property of their owners. Under chattel slavery, slaves, they have no rights or freedom, and they are being considered as a commodity. They are being considered as goods. The slave trade that took place in Africa by the Europeans can be categorized under the chattel slavery. Also, debt bondage. Debt bondage or pawning is also a form of slavery where individuals are enslaved as a result of their inability to repay a debt. Yes, during the pre-colonial era, anyone, maybe you borrow money or you loan for a particular thing and failure to pay up your debt, such person can be hijacked to serve as a slave to the master to work for a certain number of months or years that will serve as a collateral for the debt being owed. 3, domestic slavery. Domestic slavery involves enslaved individuals working primarily with the household of their owners. This is one of the most widespread forms of slavery in pre-colonial Africans. Domestic slaves, they worked in all forms of household tasks, such as cooking, cleaning, child care, and other domestic chores. Going forward, we have the religious slavery, cultural or religious slavery. In some African societies, certain slaves are kept for ritual purposes, including religious ceremonies, sacrifices, or burial rites. In some cases, some religious slaves are being captured and being sacrificed to appease gods in some societies during the pre-colonial era. Why this form of slavery was less common? It was deeply rooted in the spiritual and cultural practices of some certain African communities. Then also agricultural slavery. The agricultural slavery involves the use of enslaved persons in farms and other agricultural activities. This form of slavery was prominent in regions that have fertile agricultural land. Slaves under this category are being subjected to hard labor, and their living conditions varies depending on the region and the nature of the work involved. How slaves were obtained in Africa. How slaves were obtained in Africa when during the pre-colonial era and when the Europeans arrived. Number one is warfare. When African kingdoms or tribes engage in conflict, whoever wins the war usually capture the occupants. Usually capture those who live in that particular kingdom or community, take them to their kingdom to be their slaves or being sold to traders. This is very popular. Majority of the strong states that have strong army, whenever they wage war against other community, they enslave the people after winning the war, bring them to their community to serve as their slaves and also to be sold to the merchants, those who patronize the slave trade. 2, raiding and kidnapping. Yes, many African societies engaged in raiding other neighboring communities, especially to capture people who will be sold into slavery. Some set of people can just gather themselves to serve as a force to raid or kidnap people in order to sell them. This is as far as how people go in order to get money during the pre-colonial African period and during the European era when the slave trade was in existence. 3, debt redemption. Individuals who are unable to repay their debt, like I've said earlier, can be forced into slavery to work off what they owe. Maybe you owe a particular money worth of maybe 50 kobo. You may be requested to work for 5 months between the person who borrowed you the money will tell you, okay, for the 50 kobo you're unable to pay me, you have to work for 5 months. Once you are able to serve me for 5 months, then your debt will be cleared. So debt redemption is also a way of obtaining slaves in Africa. 4, judicial punishment for crimes. Yes, there are some punishments for some certain crimes being committed that slavery or to serve as a slave is one of the punishments. Also, slave markets. Yes, people go to markets where you're supposed to where people buy and sell goods and commodities. There are some certain markets that are mainly meant for the buying and selling of slaves. People, especially the European merchants, they go to those markets to buy slaves from those who engage in such inhuman and unfortunate business. Going forward, we'll look at the practice question. This is the WAEC question 2016. It says, name 3 continents that participated in slave trade. Continents, not country. That is why it's very important when you want to attempt WAEC question, you need to read and understand the question. Continents. There are 3 major continents that participated in the slave trade. Africa, which Nigeria is one of. Europe, Britain is one of the countries. France and others. America, both the North America and the South America. These are the 3 major continents that participated in the slave trade that took place in Africa. I believe you have learned something today. If yes, kindly check our social media platform displayed on the screen and comment your observation, feedback, and suggestion. Thank you for watching.